Hi everyone, and welcome to the Netgain webinar series. Today's topic takes a look at the current state of cybersecurity and what new attack methods hackers are using today and tomorrow to bypass some of your safeguards. Before we jump in, I just wanted to go over a few quick housekeeping items for today's session. I know everyone always asks, so yes, we are recording this webinar and we will send you out a link to the webinar within the next couple of days or so. I also encourage you to use the chat box in the sidebar to ask any questions throughout this webinar. With a topic like cybersecurity, it's a topic we get a lot of questions about from clients and prospects, so I anticipate that we'll have a pretty active discussion at the end of the session. So do make sure that you submit those questions, and we'll keep our eyes open for those as we're moving forward in the conversation today. And then as for the format, for the next 60 minutes, we will have a 40-minute or so discussion. We'll see how the conversation goes, and then we will, like I said, save time for questions at the end. So make sure you send in those questions when you have them. And then finally, not all of the strategies and techniques that we talk about here today will be the best option for your organization. There are cybersecurity nuances that will be specific to your organization and your needs, so make sure you check with your IT team or your IT partner first before implementing any of the strategies that we talk about today. So I know our audience today includes a mix of industry professionals and Netgain clients. So for those of you who aren't familiar with us at Netgain, we're a strategic cloud service provider that enables healthcare practices and financial services firms to better serve their clients and patients, increase employee productivity, and grow their businesses as well. So you require and deserve your IT to be ultra secure, highly reliable, and lightning fast, while also still gaining and receiving incredible support, compliance, and stability. And that's precisely what we deliver here at Netgain, so you can rest assured that we've got your IT covered. We've come to be known for something that we call the Netgain standard here at Netgain, and it's a set of 8 features or tenets that come standard with every solution we offer for every client, every time. Whereas sometimes you need to pay extra for services like these, even if they're even available from your service provider at all, they just come standard when you work with us, so that you can truly gain peace of mind when it comes to your IT, and it's as simple as that. One of these tenets, as you can see on the screen, is ultra secure protection from cyber threats, which I know is of great import to all of you today, which is why you registered for the webinar in the first place. So without any further ado, I'm pleased to introduce our guest for today's session, Charles Kilmer.
Good.
So we're joined today by Charles. Oh, hey, Charles. Hey. We're joined today by Charles, who's our Netgain, our security officer here at Netgain. He's an expert in IT security and works very closely with organizations of all sizes and specialties throughout the U.S. to design secure computing environments that fit businesses' needs. And with over 7 years focused on security at Netgain and 17 years of broader experience ranging from programming to server management to the management of virtualization infrastructures, Charles has a really tremendous perspective on the role of IT security in today's complex compliance landscape. My name is Phil Woken. I'm the Director of Marketing here at Netgain, and I'll serve as the moderator for today's webinar. So Charles, I know that you're a busy guy. Your schedule always fills up super quick, so I appreciate you carving out some time, and welcome.
Great to be here. Thank you.
Perfect. All right. Well, let's go ahead and get started and dive right in, maybe first taking a look back and at maybe more of the theoretical origins of malware. Charles, what can you tell us about how malware has started in its infancy?
Yeah, so back in 1949, there was an article written, The Theory of Self-Reproducing Automata, which was sort of the catalyst to modern malware, or the birthplace of it. This described how, conceptually, programs could be written to reproduce much like real life organisms. 20-some years later, in 1971, the Creeper virus was written to sort of test this theory. Creeper spread itself through a network, depositing files and spreading much like a worm would, automatically without user intervention. Reaper was sort of an early antivirus. It was built with the single purpose to go and remove Creeper from systems. They had to build a program because Creeper moved too quickly. They had to have a program that could move equally or faster than Creeper could. 1986 is an interesting one. The Brain boot sector virus was written. The interesting part about this, because it was so long ago and writing viruses and hacking wasn't yet illegal, the authors of this included their name and address in the malware. So 25 years later, Mikko Hyppönen, he's the chief research officer at F-Secure, a prominent internet antivirus company, traveled to Pakistan to the address and found that the authors that wrote it still worked in a company called Brain, which was the name of the malware, and had a pretty interesting interview with them. So long history there. There's evidence that hacking, so to speak, goes back to 1903 and maybe earlier. There was someone setting up a Morse code wireless transmission demonstration. And a few minutes before the demonstration of this wireless Morse code signal, somebody hacked the signal and spit out some Morse code disparaging the creator of that technology. So hacking has got a long history, and it's led to some troubles for our businesses.
Sure. So does hacking then ultimately help innovate? I mean, if we didn't know that those situations were there, would we have innovated and created some of these safeguards that we have today, or started? I suppose it helps us think about things in a different way. Would that be fair?
It definitely helps us think about things in a more secure fashion. If hacking wasn't there, arguably, you may not need to think about things in a more secure fashion and what may already exist. A joke I like to throw out every once in a while is, if you take all the time computers have saved us and subtract from that all the headaches and time we've spent dealing with them, it's a wash. While it's meant to be funny, I think it speaks directly to the problems that malware and security have created for us.
And so obviously, many of these were, maybe the 86, maybe there was some sort of connection, but this would require being able to access, go in and sit down in front of the machines. Is that right, or were there other ways that they were using it besides, before the internet existed?
Yeah, so the boot sector virus, how they had to travel or propagate that virus early on. Being a boot sector virus, they were infecting the boot sector of a computer floppy disk, those 5-inch or 3-inch disks that we used to use. If that disk were left in the computer and the computer turned on, that would result in infecting the computer. And then any disk that was subsequently put into that computer would be infected too. So this is a virus that largely propagated through the sharing of infected disks. Disks that were infected would infect computers eventually, and those computers would infect more disks, and they would get shared and propagate.
And who doesn't like sharing a good old-fashioned floppy disk, right?
Yeah, that was pretty common back then.
All right. Well, let's start looking at some of those older methods then. Maybe leading from that boot sector virus that you mentioned. Talk to us about some of the older methods that hackers had used.
Yep. So absolutely, the U.S. disks or the floppy disks that got shared were the primary method of spreading malware prior to the internet that we have today. That continued through the internet, and all of these methods still continue today in varying degrees. But back in 1986, that was the primary method for spreading a virus. Macro viruses became popular when Microsoft Word and Excel began bundling Word and Excel macros, ways to put programs or functions into documents to make them more useful. Every time we've made something more useful, it's made it more useful to both sides, the criminal and the benevolent organizations as well. Viruses embedded within software shared on the internet. People would love to download and install new software, and there wasn't much in the way of antivirus software or researching credible known sources of that software. So people would download those and run them. viruses would run rampant in college campuses in the late 90s and early 2000s as well. With the ability to share things across a campus dorm network, these viruses would spread quite quickly. 1998 introduced the CIH virus, which was another virus that would propagate through the internet through shared media. The damaging thing it could do was to erase a component of a computer so that the computer couldn't even turn on anymore. So this was one of the first destructive malwares that came out. Some of those could be recovered, but some of those components were built into the computer hardware in a way that it was very difficult to recover, and people had to replace those computers. CIH stood for the initials of the creator. He was found, but again couldn't be charged because hacking and writing viruses was not yet illegal. People would also, as email became more popular, send malicious web links to malicious websites, or they'd outright send malicious documents through email. There's the infamous "I love you" virus that went around and took advantage of a weakness in an old version of Microsoft Outlook. That spread through the internet quite quickly because it didn't need much user intervention at all.
Got it. So are any of these methods still being used today, or will any of these, resurrect from the dead, and all of a sudden we'll start seeing, freeware, free PDF editing software that, that still holds some of these viruses or some of these risks? Anything that we have to worry about there?
Yeah, all of these methods remain in use today. These have just been added to their toolbox, and they'll look through their toolbox for the right tool for the right situation. Whether it's infecting a disk with malware and then dropping it in a parking lot that we'll talk about next, or sending malicious documents in the form of a PDF or a Word document or a link to a website. At the end, we'll talk in a summary about all the different attack methods, ranked in an order of what's the most prevalent today that we need to worry about. And all of these still get used when their time calls for it.
Okay. So when did this start becoming illegal? That, where they couldn't start using or they had to stop using their initials when they were naming viruses? When did hacking become illegal?
I don't know the date that happened. We do have laws against that in the U.S., the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. That makes a lot of this type of abuse of access illegal. Other countries have implemented those things at different times. I believe CIH came from Taiwan, and I think they implemented some laws shortly after the CIH virus came out. But different countries, different laws, and that's largely what complicates the security industry's job. There's no single jurisdiction to prosecute or enforce any laws. So figuring out who did it is very difficult on the internet. Finding a way to penalize or prosecute them is also very difficult, crossing jurisdictions between nations. Got it.
Okay. All right. Well, let's move on then and talk a little bit about some of the methods that are currently being used in today's environment.
Yeah, so malware embedded in USB drives. Nobody shares floppy 5 1/4 or 3 1/2 inch drives anymore. It's all USB drives. So a common malware penetration testing technique is to install some monitoring, remote code execution, remote access software on USB drives and drop them in front of the parking lot or in the parking lot of the company that you are testing. Invariably, somebody picks them up, curiosity gets the better of them, and they plug it into their computer to see what's on it. When that happens, it activates the malware or the test software and confirms that somebody installed it, inserted it into some computer, and then the penetration testing company, a legitimate organization, would report on the success rate of that type of attack. Other methods to get people to put those into their computers include any variety that their imagination can come up with. I've heard of some dressing up as garbage crew, sanitation crew members, going up to the front desk and simply handing it to the receptionist with the pretense of, I found this in the dumpster, I don't know what's on it, thought I'd give it to you guys so you can check it out. And somebody would look at it just to make sure one of their employees didn't throw some valuable information in the dumpster, and in so doing, activate some malware. Remote code execution is the security industry's way of saying we don't need any user interaction to compromise that computer. We can do it all over the internet simply by sending malicious information to it. That is pretty rare nowadays. Most of the computer software we use doesn't make those mistakes anymore. The hackers have subsequently, because computers are so secure, moved on to the next weakest link, which is the people that operate those computers. So being that we are people and not patchable, will continue to be the weakest link there for a while. Rats, not the furry little kinds of rodents, remote access Trojans. These are pieces of malware that, once installed into a system, provide a remote access method to the hacker. These will get used so they can carry out further instructions and further compromises of a victim's network. So once this malware gets installed, they can do things like install other software, create fake accounts, log in with those accounts through other less suspicious means over the network, and then corroborate stories that they may give to some social engineering attack later. These are primarily built for exfiltrating information or watching for banking information that's in an organization.
Okay, got it. So I'm a non-technical guy, right? I sit in the marketing department. I'm not on the security team. So I know we go, all of the employees at Netgain here go through security training and courses and refreshes and all of that. So I remember when I was going through my initial training, they were talking about these USB drives that might be scattered or dropped on the ground in a parking structure or something like that outside of the office building, and it makes sense, right? Like, you're curious, you want to make sure that nothing's being no information is leaving the building that shouldn't. But how does an organization deal with that? I mean, so let me ask this. I know you've said, well, if you find a USB drive in the parking lot, bring it to us and we'll take care of it. How do we, and maybe by relation, how do other organizations handle the testing of these USB drives?
Yeah, largely the method I use for testing found USB drives is to put them into the shredder. I don't trust them, and I don't care about what data is on them. I want them destroyed and save the trouble of potential malware that may be on them. If you get USB drives through some legitimate means at a trade show or otherwise, you can install it into an environment in a safe way, but you have to be real intentional about that method. One way to do that, and this is different for every organization, minor nuances, you could designate a single computer for USB data extraction. Allow that computer to send files to some file server that you own over SFTP, a secure transfer protocol. Then they can scan that file with any anti-malware software on the file server. This won't prevent a compromise, but it will significantly raise the bar. If there's malware on that USB drive, inserting it into this one computer that should be disconnected from the rest of your network through firewalls, except for that SFTP connection, would limit the scope of damage to that one computer. That one computer could be re-imaged every day so that any information that is downloaded from a USB drive one day won't be available to malware the next day. And even if it does get compromised through the firewall technology, it won't be able to communicate that information out to any other website. So it doesn't prevent a compromise of that system. It sort of isolates where the compromise is. And then the files that are extracted from it need to be treated with some suspicion as well, and scanned and controlled to whatever extent possible.
Okay. you'd mentioned penetration testing earlier, and so again, non-technical guy in me, and maybe someone else in the audience has this question too, but can you talk to us about what penetration testing is, what the process is, and just, is that something every organization should do? Oh, Charles, you there?
Can you hear me?
Oh, there we go. Yep.
Okay, good. So there are penetration tests that can be done at different degrees and different costs. So it shouldn't be a knee-jerk reaction of we won't be able to afford it. There are a lot of options to make it affordable. The penetration test in its simplest explanation is hiring a hacker to find the weaknesses. The benefit there is you are hiring the hacker, and when they find a weakness, they will tell you about it. Now, you don't have to go scouring the dark web to find these hackers for hire. That's not the place to go. Search Google for known reputable penetration testing security companies. They'll come in, they know what the hackers use, they know how to hack into organizations. They'll hack into your organization and likely succeed, and then they'll tell you how they did it and what you can do to improve. So these are very good tests. I liken it to going to a doctor. You don't go to the doctor only when you're sick, or at least you shouldn't. You go to the doctor for a checkup, and the doctor knows the current ailments that are out there and the new science about what conditions could be affecting us. Same thing on a penetration test. You're going to a security professional. They know what the current ailments are and the current conditions, and they'll check your organization out to see how you fare against those.
Got it. So this is probably something where you're going to want to maybe ask for some recommendations from folks who have used one of those organizations in the past, not just whatever is the first result in Google.
Yeah, always ask whenever you're in any vendor negotiation. Always ask for some recommendations or references that you can call and check and see how their other clients' experiences went.
Okay. Got it. All right. Well, let's look future then, and talk about some of the newer methods that hackers are using over the past few years to find those exploits.
Yeah. So top here, targeting mobile and IoT devices. IoT, Internet of Things shorthand. Everybody in tech loves that phrase, but it's a thing, so there it is. There's a recent story of a casino getting hacked through an Internet of Things IoT aquarium. The aquarium apparently reported things like temperature, salinity, water quality, other bits of information to some company that managed the aquarium. Someone in the casino found there was a weakness in the aquarium, hacked into it, got access to other sections of the casino's network, and caused some serious headaches for them. Malicious advertisements. We all go to websites. They all have advertisements on them. That's how many websites make their money, to make free content on the internet. Those advertisements can have code in them. Code to play some video or audio file, run a survey, do different things to make the web browsing website experience better. Those advertisements can have malicious code. In those cases, that sometimes gets shortened to malvertisements, malicious advertisements. There is an increasing focus on them as well, because by compromising an ad network, Yahoo or Google, they can target many different people at once from a trusted website. So any website that uses Google Ads or Yahoo AdWords will serve up these malicious ads to anybody that visits their websites, and the website won't even necessarily be aware that they're serving malware. Forbes used to ask me to disable my ad blocker. Some security researchers went to Forbes and they got asked the same thing, and they did, and they were served malware. They made a big article about how Forbes is serving malware to its advertisements, and now Forbes doesn't ask me to disable my ad blocker anymore. So it's a tricky situation because companies like that need the ad revenue, but security needs not to be served malware. So that's a tricky position the industry is in today. I like free content on the internet. I don't like malware. I don't know where that's going to fall yet.
Let me ask this, Charles, before I lose this thought.
Yeah.
So were you saying that when someone is using an ad blocker, that they were then served malvertising, or is ad blocking, if you turn off ads and you use a plugin to block your ads, that is a way to protect you from malvertising?
Yeah, good to clarify. When the ad blocker is enabled, ads that have malware in them are being blocked. So in the case of Forbes, they were asking people to disable their ad blocker because they needed the ads to be served so the ad companies would pay Forbes.
Sure.
So Forbes needed us to disable the ad blocker for their revenue stream. We leave the ad blocker enabled to protect from malware.
Sure. And I suppose by suggesting that you disable it, they were putting themselves at risk too. That's a catch-22, I suppose, for the publisher. Okay. All right. Thanks for clarifying that.
It resulted in some bad press that I'm sure they didn't like. So ransomware, we've all heard about that. We'll talk a bit more about that on the next slide. There's a proof of concept copy and paste exploit. This wouldn't fall under the realm of malware directly, but definitely an attack vector. Many IT admins, there's a joke that IT admins aren't geniuses, they're just better at Google. That's a reference to most of what IT admins do can be found on Google if you search correctly and understand what you read. A lot of code is also published by computer admins in their interest of helping other people. Malicious criminals can also publish that code pretending like it's legitimate. And there are ways to display the code but not show all of it to the screen. And the attack vector there is then they're hoping that an admin would come to that site, copy the big section of code, and paste it directly into their administration systems. What they see on the screen is legitimate, good code. What they end up copying contains malicious code. So it's an interesting attack vector that flies under the radar pretty easily, and it's hard to detect and block. So the only real way to detect that from an IT admin's perspective, whenever you copy code from the internet, paste it into something that won't run it, like Notepad or TextPad or Microsoft Word even. I'd prefer the Notepads and TextPads and Notepad++ because they wouldn't necessarily render any of the content, and Microsoft Word could still hide some of what was pasted. Fileless malware. Anti-malware softwares historically have relied on there actually being a file to scan to see if a file is malicious. Malware is starting to take the approach of, let's not write files anymore. Let's write commands that the victim's system knows how to run in a trusted application. So the old school ways of doing this that weren't very effective due to limitations in the system are malicious batch file scripts that would run in DOS. PowerShell is a much more powerful administration scripting engine. So there are proof of concepts and some out in the wild fileless malware attacks that run completely through PowerShell commands. So a victim would open a malicious document. Instead of that malicious document downloading some malware, it would just run the PowerShell commands directly. Those get very difficult to detect and find, and the industry is responding to that.
So that could be something then, that fileless malware where, I've gotten emails and say, oh, that one has an attachment, and I might click on, just a single click or something like that, or I might start that process but not download or save the file. I could, so you're saying that is something where it might not take that extra step, it might not need it. It could go that extra, or it could start infecting without fully being downloaded.
Right. So it wouldn't even need to download anything. The complete list of commands that it would run through PowerShell could be contained within that malicious Word document that was received. Don't count on anti-malware software detecting that Word document as malicious either, because it's becoming increasingly trivial for them to change it enough where anti-malware software will not detect it as malicious.
Got it. So that's something where maybe people would have that false sense of security now, or need to change how they think about some of those email attachments or whatever that file is. So that's good to know. I didn't know that. Learn something new every day, Charles.
Good.
So obviously technology is great. Internet of Things is great. We all need refrigerators that tell us when we're out of milk or eggs, right? Okay, maybe not, but the technology is there, and it helps us, be more productive and efficient at work and at home. And I think organizations want to take advantage of technology as they look for a business edge and deploy some of that technology. But how can we? It seems like this is, some of these new risks might paralyze folks that they can't implement some of the technologies that they want to. Is there any way around that? How can they capitalize on those technologies with that threat hanging over their heads?
Yeah. Again, from my opinion, security has often taken a backseat to convenience and productivity. Most companies are made to implement and produce a great new product. Security often slows that chain down, that process down. This has created a lack of security controls, and that's being taken advantage of by the criminals. So I think simply, and I'll say simply, but I know it's hard in many businesses, we need to slow down and take a look at what security controls need to be put in place and implement them, and then resume business as normal. Most of the attack methods we'll talk about today can be managed through a small set of security controls that's well defined. We just need to implement them.
Okay, got it. All right, well, let's move forward, because I've seen the next slide and it's scary. So just go ahead and just talk to us about what we're seeing on the screen here, Charles.
So F-Secure, I mentioned them earlier. Mikko Hyppönen is the Chief Research Officer. F-Secure, a major internet company, anti-malware, antivirus company. They put this graphic together to cover and list all of the ransomware that has come out since 2010 through 2016, the beginning of 2016. The main point here is this is the new normal. Prior to ransomware, criminals would have to break into an organization, find the important, valuable information, get it out of the organization, and then try to find a buyer for it. They don't want to use it. They're in the business of hacking. They aren't in the business of credit card fraud and medical insurance fraud. So that long process of breaking in, finding information, getting it out, and selling it is difficult. So ransomware has been developed. This cuts out all of those middlemen. They've got a direct-to-market model now. They don't have to steal the information or find the information that's valuable. They don't have to hack into an organization. They've found the buyer, and that's the victim. So they get the malware into your system. They encrypt all of the data. They don't care what it is. And then they wait for you to buy it if you want it back. They count on the expectation that many people don't keep backups, and the people that you hear paying a ransom didn't have a good backup or didn't have a recent enough backup to justify not paying the ransom. The other benefit they have is the ransom is relatively small, so many companies have taken it as an inexpensive security lesson. They pay the ransom. Most of the time, they get their files back. If you think about ransomware as a business model, they don't want bad press. If the story gets out that don't pay your ransom, you won't get your files back, people won't pay the ransom and they won't make money. So they put effort on making sure you can get your files back most of the time, not all the time. Some of the times they've made mistakes that allows for free decryption tools to be developed. Other times they make mistakes that doesn't allow any decryption even if you pay. Others have made what appear to be intentional decisions to never return the files or the decryption keys. So if you're compromised by ransomware and you do have to pay or lose the data, always talk to some security professional to see if you're lucky enough to get one of the free decryptions, or if you're unlucky enough to get one that will never give you the files back. So they added to this document in 2016, at the end of 2016, to include all of 2016. And it has exploded. I'm very curious to see how they will structure this graphic to cover 2017. Every single one of those bars is a new ransomware that came out. They had to put 12 offshoots on that graphic to account for the 12 months of the year. So this is absolutely the new normal, and if you are not backing up your data, you will be.
That's crazy. So to that end, with proper disaster recovery and data backup, and doing that, whatever the right cadence is there, I suppose it's going to depend and fluctuate depending on the organization as to the cadence of that or frequency. But so what you're saying then is, if you have good data backup and data hygiene procedures in place, you can probably get by without, when a ransomware would come in, you just say, nope, not interested, go ahead and delete my data because I've got it on this backup that was just, very recently backed up or something along those lines. Am I hearing you right?
Yep. Every company should have a disaster recovery plan to some extent. And part of that disaster recovery plan are two things, the recovery point objective and the recovery time objective. That recovery point objective speaks very much to how old are your backups and how old can you afford them to be. Similar to ransomware, if all of your computer systems spontaneously die and all of the hard drives are inaccessible and corrupted at the same moment, even in the absence of malware, a hurricane comes through and floods everything, and same day an earthquake shakes them all too. What's your recovery point objective? How far back will you have to go to get a backup set? How much data can you stand to lose before it's a large impact on the company? Ransomware is counting on the ransom is small, so you're always going to favor paying a little ransom to get your data back.
Sure. True. More of a convenience at that point. Okay. So obviously this can get overwhelming quickly. Looking at this list and you're going, oh my, I mean, how do you can't stay on top of everything, or because I think a lot of the people on this webinar have a lot of other things that they need to get done during the course of the day. So staying on top of the latest attacks and threats could be daunting. Any resources or advice of things that people can do to that they should follow or check out or stay up to date on? Any recommendations? Obviously you talked about the backup process. Anything else you can share?
Yeah, staying up to date with the scope of the malware variants is best left to malware researchers. All of these can be defeated with the same set of strong security controls, having that solid backup process, educating the staff about phishing attacks. Phishing attacks are the emails that come through that try to entice the individual, the victim, to click on a link or open that attachment. Invest in strong application whitelisting. Antivirus functions by maintaining a list of what's known bad and allowing everything that it doesn't know about or knows is good. Application whitelisting is the guilty until proven innocent approach. We're not going to trust any software until we believe that it's not malicious. So new software, new malware that comes through an application whitelisting secured system will not be allowed to run because we don't know what that software does, so we assume it's bad and it's blocked. Know what devices should be able to access the information in your organization. This is one of the top critical security controls. Know what devices are in your organization. Also know what applications are in your organization and are approved for accessing your information. Patches have to get installed when they're available, especially on mobile devices. They are what close the security holes that many malwares depend upon to break into and compromise the system. So looking for an ability to get current patches in your computing devices is a very important control to implement.
Okay, and when you say patches, these are things like when, on my iPhone, or on, I suppose an Android device, it says, there's a new version of the operating system, and I want you to update the software on the phone. Is that a mobile patch? Is that how that's defined?
Yep. Those are patches that get pushed out to the phone and become available. There should be a consistency between how those are received. If you're in a web page and the web page is saying that you have a patch missing, don't click on that link in the web page. That's not legitimate. Go to your operating systems or settings folder, application. Look for the update in the normal, usual method.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, that's like when you see that pop-up that says, your computer's infected. Download the software now for a free virus scan, or scan your computer now, and it looks like it's a system message, but it's just the malware trying to get in.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Well, let's go on to the next slide then, and just kind of talk about summarizing these attack vectors.
So yeah, summarizing here, this is really all we've talked about today. Malware comes through in one of these 5 methods by and large, and first and foremost, email. Email will come through with a malicious attachment, with a link to a malicious website, or potentially no malicious software link at all, and simply a social engineering request. This is where wire transfer fraud comes in. Wire transfer fraud is simply pretending or sending a spoofed email, a fake email, to some recipient in the organization. They do their targeting to make sure the recipient is likely able to carry out a wire transfer request. They forge the email to make it look like it comes from the CEO or president, and simply ask, what information do you need to make a wire transfer? They put whatever pretense they want in there. I worked with one company that lost over $200,000 over the course of a month through this type of wire transfer fraud email attack. No malware involved, simply social engineering. They requested the transfer, they gave a good enough story, and they submitted the wire transfer. It worked, so they immediately tried again and again and again until they got wise to it and stopped processing them. But by that point, they'd lost a lot of money. Web browsing, second on the list. You could go to a malicious site accidentally. You could click on a web link in a Google search result, and that happens to be leading to a malicious site. Malvertisements, those malicious advertisements, could pop up on any trusted website that you may go to. Those all have an opportunity to compromise your computer, primarily if you are missing a patch on your system. Now, there are things called 0 days in the security industry. Those are vulnerabilities in a system for which there is no patch. So if a malvertising attack or a malicious website takes advantage of a 0-day flaw, you can't be patched against it. And unless you have some other better control in your system, that malware will run. Uncontrolled app stores. This is not a problem in the non-jailbroken iPhone, iOS universe. This primarily comes in play in Android marketplaces. The Google Play Store, the official one, does a good job of controlling the apps that are in there and removing ones that are found to be malicious. But there are a lot of other places to get apps that run on Google without any modification, or that run on an iPhone if the iPhone has been jailbroken. These are great places to simply copy an existing popular app, package it with some custom malware, and simply wait for people to download the wrong version of that software. Shared media is becoming less common simply because the other methods are so successful, but there's still a risk. USB drives, I went to VMworld, and one of the vendors on the vendor floor was handing out USB drives with all of their marketing material. I plugged it into my computer, and my antivirus software started going crazy with all the malware on it. So whatever company or computer they were using to package those USB drives had malware on it and was installing the malware on every USB drive. How many people that compromised, I don't know. Typically, 10,000 or more people go to VMworld. That was in 2009. DVDs could come packaged with malware. We had a DVD from a vendor here that was found to have malware included on it. I had to go work with the vendor to get a clean copy of that. Downloads, same thing. They can be embedded with malware. Then you're trusting your other controls to protect you in those cases. I have network access last. It's not least. It's still used, but it isn't the primary target again because the others are so successful. Having network access provides more access to systems than not having local non-firewall access to. That sounds kind of confusing. Having an access to another computer without a firewall between you provides many more opportunities to compromise that other computer. Public internet access relies on your victim organization publishing a vulnerable piece of software. This doesn't happen very often. Like I said before, computers are largely very secure today. That's why they favor the email attachments, the web browsing, the app stores, the shared media, because people can't be patched. Humans are the weakest link, and that's where they spend their time and energy. When remote code execution flaws, network access type flaws are found, that's when there's a large push to get patches installed on these devices. There's also an equally large push on the malicious community to develop some malware that can take advantage of that before it's all closed. That's where you'll see viruses and malware that hit the news because it circumnavigates the globe in an hour a day.
Got it. Okay. All right. That's a good summary. And I want to start looking toward the future as well too, and in some of those prevention methods that we've kind of talked about, but also talking about those as well too. So as we kind of get ready to wrap up here in a few minutes, make sure if you do have any questions, you get those over into the chat box so that we can ask those when we get to that point. But Charles, as we look to the future and look forward, what are some of the steps we can take to help protect ourselves?
Yeah, I spent a lot of time trying to come up with good advice here, and I think it's that there isn't much. Computers or people are the two things to work on compromising. Computers hold the information, people hold the access to the information. They've expended a lot of energy compromising computers directly. In response, Apple and Microsoft and Linux and other operating systems and software have made huge improvements in the security of the software. People are the other option, and they'll continue focusing on compromising people or convincing people to help them in their exploit or their attack. So a continued focus on social engineering. I don't see much in innovation or new methods in these, simply new methods built to get around some of the technical controls that we're implementing. Technical controls are always at odds with functionality and usability of a computer, usability for a human's sake or a person's sake. These technical controls have to allow the person to use the computer, so the malware, the hackers, find ways to take advantage of that flexibility to install and run the software.
Sorry about that. How frequently then, Charles, should those organizations be reviewing those security protocols with their staff?
So I'd say at least annually, with examples of recent attacks sent to all staff monthly. They should highlight and publicly commend people for catching and reporting phishing attacks. Don't punish and penalize people that fall for the attacks. We're all human, we all make mistakes. The people that worry me the most are the people that won't report when they fell for a phishing attack. The sooner they report that they fell for it, the sooner we can get in, remove the compromise, hopefully before they got any information that would be damaging. Take the time to educate everybody else about how they fell for it. Punishing the employee may encourage others to not report it, and that's where the future compromises would have more time to do more damage in the network. The sooner it can be reported, it can be corrected, and that reduces the impact of that compromise.
Okay, good. So as we move to the final slide then here, what's the most important thing that that people should walk away with today?
Same as last time, internet is not a safe place. Simply having that internet connection provides or presents a risk. There are ways to address that: investing in technology and professionals, penetration tests to give your organization that checkup, restricting unnecessary internet connections, disabling ads or enabling ad blockers in the network if they're not important for the business. I hesitate always on giving that advice because I know the content on the internet depends on ad revenue, and that's a constant current battle between revenue and security.
Yeah, those dang marketing teams, I tell you what, they're always looking to, I know. At least we get along, Charles. All right. Okay. All right. Well, that makes sense. Well, let's go ahead and go into questions. We've got about 5 minutes left here. I know there were a couple of ones that came through, so I want to make sure that we talk about those. Paul had asked that, was wondering, if he does get attacked by ransomware, if he should pay. And I know we talked briefly about that earlier, Charles. Any additional insight in there if an organization should pay, or is there a threshold that that cost-benefit analysis of whether or not they should pay up?
Yeah, so first I'll go back to always make sure you talk to some security professional prior to paying. They'll give you some options of likelihood that you'll get your data back even if you do. If there are free options, those types of advice. The advice on whether or not to pay, if that is the only method and it is likely you get the data back, has gone back and forth. The law enforcement community was on the side of don't pay because that feeds the beast. Arguably, that beast is out of the bag and it's not going away, so there's no point in that anymore. Some police department, I think it was South Carolina, got compromised by ransomware, and then they ended up paying shortly after that advice was given of don't pay. So it's easy advice to give, it's hard advice to take. I believe the current FBI advice is pay the ransom. It's a small ransom, it's a problem that's not going away. That may be the best option to get your business back online and running. This is always a business decision. Is the money and reputation worth it? If you don't pay and you don't get your files back, you may have to make some public announcement. Is that more damaging than the $700 that it may cost, or $2,000, or who knows what? So always an internal business decision. I don't think that paying is going to do more damage today with as large as the ransomware problem has gotten. I see that as a drop in the pond, and they'll move on to others that will pay, and they'll still survive.
All right, so whether or not that, it sounds like that would be a case-by-case basis and would depend on, what the situation is. Is it and I asked this because, Charles, I know you and I were having a conversation on this morning with cryptocurrency in general. Should it just be something where an organization should factor that into their budget? Not that they anticipate or expect something to happen, but if it's Bitcoin, for instance, or Ethereum, or Ether, I should say, or Litecoin, or some of these other cryptocurrencies that are rapidly increasing in value, is it something that organizations should work with their finance team just to hold that and hold it for a ransom and buy it now while it's still relative, while the value might be lower than what it could be in the future? Maybe that's a finance decision, but is it something organizations should at least consider?
Definitely consider. That would absolutely be a finance decision. I'm pretty enthusiastic about cryptocurrency in general, and I have some, but not in saving up for me getting compromised by ransomware. I spend the time and energy in preventing that compromise, and if I do fall for it or it does compromise me, having a good offline backup that can't get compromised as easily. So I guess if an organization wanted to reduce the effects of ransomware, spends the time and energy on a good backup security structure, that's probably more expensive than the ransomware, but it's going to save a lot of headache and publicity in the future. I don't think it's a bad idea to buy Bitcoins or other cryptocurrency for hanging on to. It's a relatively small investment for arguably a pretty small savings in the long term.
Got it. Okay. Sharon is wondering as well. So from a connections perspective, she's wondering if her browsing if she's at less of a risk from compromising some of their sensitive data if she's in a local session versus being in an RDP or a terminal session or on their network. Is that I assume this would be for non-patient or non-client sort of situations, maybe an administrator or someone that's in an operational role that has to visit websites like I don't know, Forbes or whatever, but is someone safer or is their organization safer if that person is doing that browsing in a local session, meaning like right on their desktop or their laptop rather than logging into a terminal session?
Yeah, that would largely depend upon the security controls they have locally versus remotely. For Netgain clients, I always advocate run it from the terminal servers. We have more security controls on the terminal servers than many organizations do locally. We can monitor and watch the logs. We've got application whitelisting installed. So if the organization that runs that remote desktop session has a stronger security posture than you do, I would advise using their stronger security posture and run everything from there.
Okay, good. There are a couple more questions. We'll follow up with those here after because I know we're at time. So thanks for everyone who submitted those, and thanks so much, Charles. I know, like I said, I know your time is valuable, and appreciate you dropping by and enlightening us with some cybersecurity knowledge. So it's always a pleasure to have those conversations.
Absolutely.
And yeah, and on behalf of Charles, myself, and the entire Netgain team, I wanted to thank you all for also carving out some time over your lunch hour or before or after to join us today for today's conversation. As a reminder, we're going to be emailing you in the next few days with a link to the on-demand replay of this webinar, as well as a link to register for our next webinar in the series as well. So in the meantime, if you do have any additional cybersecurity questions that we didn't cover today, Charles' contact information is on the screen, so you can feel free to reach out to him there. We've also created a lot of blog and ebook content around various cybersecurity issues just because it is such a hot button topic and one that, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And so you can always check out our Knowledge Hub at blog.netgainhosting.com for more information. Again, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you all next time.